Hey, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing a very special flight from Singapore. However, I'm not going to be flying from Changi Airport. I'm going to be flying from the far lesser known Seletar Airport on board a Firefly Airways flight from Singapore to Subang, effectively in Kuala Lumpur, in October 2025. I'm going to be reviewing the airport experience at Seletar Airport before the flight, including the food and drink options that are available, and then once we get on the plane, I'm going to review the seat, the service, the in-flight snacks, and of course, the arrival into Subang Airport. The journey today from Singapore to Subang clocks in at only 320 kilometers and takes approximately 45 minutes in the sky. My journey today begins with a drive to Seletar Airport. You see, Seletar is located in the north of the island, approximately the same distance from the central business district as Changi Airport. However, unlike Changi, there is no MRT train to take you there, so you're pretty much limited to driving. The journey took about 30 minutes and cost me $20, which really isn't too bad for an airport transfer. Seletar Airport itself is tiny. There's effectively one row of check-in, one cafe to get some food, and the departure gates, and that's it. This isn't surprising though, as when I checked the departure board, there were only 4 flights departing this day. It's incredible to think that this entire airport, currently, effectively only serves Firefly Airways on the Subang route. There was absolutely no queue at the check-in desk, and so I had my boarding pass in my hand in about 2 minutes. Having checked in, I decided to get some breakfast. Now, you see, there are no lounges, first or business class at Seletar Airport. Your only food and drink option is this, the Takeoff Express, which serves a mixture of local foods with perhaps a little bit stronger Malay influence. I went for one of my favourite breakfast options, which is a kaya butter toast with 2 soft-boiled eggs, and also a Diet Coke and a Takeoff. This was actually surprisingly good, and the price was a grand total of $8.30, approximately $6 US. Having had my food, there really was nothing to do except go straight through to departures. Refreshingly, the departure gate was about a 20-yard walk from the Takeoff Express, and a similar distance from the entrance to the airport. There was absolutely no queue, and I was through in about 5 minutes. Hey, if you're enjoying the video, please subscribe, it really helps my channel. The departures area is similarly tiny, and basically consists of enough seats for about 1 plane load's worth of passengers to sit on, and nothing else. This really does show that the entrance to the plane is only about 75 yards from the entrance to the airport. This is such an easy airport to go through. After waiting about 5 minutes, I caught a glimpse of the inbound flight, the ATR 72 that was going to take us to Subang. They quickly deplaned the passengers that were on it and made way for us to board. The entire process was incredibly smooth and efficient. The plane was barely a third full, so I'd estimate there were no more than 30 passengers to board. This made the boarding experience very quick and easy. I got on board and took my seat, and saw just how empty the plane was. The seats themselves were arranged in a 2-2 layout, which was about right for an aircraft of this size. They were covered in a nice red leather, which looked very tasteful and sophisticated. I was lucky that I didn't have a passenger next to me for the flight, so I had no problem filming and taking videos during the flight. The legroom was not bad. Don't be fooled by this image. I'm 6'1", so for most people, the legroom won't be an issue. I intentionally chose seat 5A, so that I would have a view directly onto the propellers. This is not a jet engine, which is rare, so I wanted to be able to see this out of a window. After about 15 minutes and a safety demonstration, we began our pushback from the gate. Taxiing to the runway took no time at all, as we were the only plane going to take off at this time. After about 2 minutes, it was time to take off. Takeoff was a little bit bumpier than I'm used to. I think this is because this is a small ATR propeller airplane instead of a large jumbo jet. Also, it was quite cool to see. Because we took off from the north of the island, we crossed into Malaysian airspace barely 1 minute after takeoff. In not too much time at all, we were above the clouds and I got to enjoy these great views on my journey to Subang. In the front of my seat was a small tray table, which was just about the right size to put a drink and a snack. They also featured an in-flight magazine, which was the only way we had in-flight entertainment, although that really wasn't an issue on this 40-minute hop. About 10 minutes after takeoff, the crew came round with some in-flight snacks, which consisted of famous Amos cookies, some Firefly branded salted peanuts, and a bottle of water. Overall, I found this to be quite generous for such a short flight. You got free cookies, a tasty bag of peanuts, and a bottle of water just about large enough to quench your thirst. This really was a short flight. After I had finished my snacks, I looked down below and saw that we were approaching Kuala Lumpur. I was admiring the lovely views below when the captain came on the speaker to announce we were beginning our descent. That really was quick. Again, a somewhat bumpy landing owing to the aircraft type, but a very short taxi, and we were right at the arrivals gate. As there was virtually no queue, immigration took all of 5 minutes, and before I knew it, I was waiting for my bag to arrive, which came onto the belt barely 10 minutes after we landed. This is such a quick way to do airport immigration, and far better than Kuala Lumpur International Airport. I'd pre-booked a taxi, and so I got straight in and made my way into central Kuala Lumpur. The journey from Subang Airport is much shorter than the journey from Kuala Lumpur Airport, taking barely half the time at about 25 minutes. Much to my surprise, I loved this flight. Those of you that do my channel regularly know that I pretty much exclusively travel in business or first class around Southeast Asia or internationally. So this was one of my only economy flights of the year. That said, it was such a cool experience. I loved flying out of Seletar Airport simply for the novelty. This was the first time I'd flown out of this, despite living in the region for over a decade. And it wasn't just the novelty. It was such a smooth and effective check-in, departure, and security experience. As I mentioned before, there were only 4 flights departing that day, so there was no queue for anything. On top of that, despite there being no lounges, I really enjoyed the food and drink. The kaya butter toast and eggs was a very good version, and you really cannot complain at the price of 8 Singapore dollars for 2 drinks and a breakfast set. Security, departures, immigration, boarding was all super efficient. Once I got on the plane, Again, it was a novelty to be on a propeller plane, as almost all of my flights these days are on jumbo jets. The crew were very friendly and the service was top-notch, and they gave a generous serving of snacks for such a short flight in economy. The arrival into Subang Airport was a dream. I normally fly into Kuala Lumpur Airport, which, for those of you that have experienced it, will understand the immigration can be an absolute nightmare, and then you're faced with an hour-long drive into the city. This, where I was through and had my bag in about 15 minutes total, and then only had a 25-minute drive to the city, was an absolute joy. This is absolutely my preferred way to get to Kuala Lumpur from Singapore. It may not have the big airport experience that you get going from Changi to KLIA, but it was super efficient, super easy, and such a nice novelty to get a small propeller to an airport much closer to the city centre. For those of you that are living in Singapore or transiting in Singapore and going to Kuala Lumpur, I highly recommend this flight and flying out of Seletar Airport. 5 out of 5 stars, absolutely no complaints.